What's going on, team? Proof here, and today I'm going to be talking about the Progenitor Dragon that Dark Zone received in Premium Collection. And if you're not familiar, the Progenitor Dragons are a set of cards that each nation received one of, that to stride into it, you need to discard a card with the same name as your Vanguard, and then you go into it, and then they all offer the ability to stride for free as long as they're face up in the G Zone, and you can't flip them for cost or effects. And as I mentioned, each nation received one, and what I'm going to do, I want to talk about the one that Dark Zone received and how it relates to Spike Brothers as a clan. So, yeah, let's go to hop into it. So, the dragon that we received is Progenitor Dragon of Gloomy Dark Formido. And as I mentioned, you have to stride it by discarding a card with the same name as your Vanguard. And then in the G Zone, continuously, this card cannot be turned face up by abilities. If this card is face up, you can stride without paying the stride cost. And then the meat of the card that we've been looking for is Auto Vanguard when placed, Counterblast 1. Your opponent chooses the same number of his or her rear guards as the number of your open rear guard circles and retires them. If 3 or more were retired, you soul charge 5 and then draw a card. So my first impression of this is that it's one of the better Progenitor Dragons. I know I haven't gone through each one individually, but if you take a look at it, it's probably one of the ones that have the most viability, in my opinion. I don't know if it's bias or what, because it helps out Spikes, but I do like what it does in the context for Spikes in and of itself. But as a standalone card, I think it's pretty good. And then being able to offer the free stride on top of what it can offer is also really good. So the good, it's unconditional retire for Spikes, because before now, the only forms of retire that we've had were Blow Kiss Olivia, which needs to hit, Cobalt Impulse, which needs to hit, and General Safety V version, which also needs to hit. So each one of those have been tied behind needing to hit to retire, unlike Formido here, which just needs to have some number of open circles, which isn't hard to come by for Spikes, and then just a counterblast. So in terms of condition retired, this one here to me is conditionless, because it's really not that hard to achieve it, which really helps out Spikes, because one of the weaknesses that we received or have had is being able to be rushed down if you're playing like a combo oriented deck, and this one here kind of helps stem the bleeding a little bit by having it as a G Zone option. And as I mentioned, it fits really well into Spikes, because a lot of what we do generates open circles, or we might have threatened rear guards that our opponent wants to hit, and then we can just clear out that circle they can clear out the circle for us before we go into Formido. And it also feeds Violence Ace. And if you haven't seen the video yet, my previous video I talked about Violence Ace and how it and what it can do for the clan. So if you're not familiar with this skill, definitely go give that a look. And this feeds Violence Ace by, if you can get the full benefit of Formido by retiring 3, you can just soul charge 5, which then feeds into Violence Ace's Soul Blast ability on the following turn if you needed to. In terms of Violence Ace, you can still generate the same number of cards in hand through the free stride as you would for going into a regular stride before you go into Violence Ace. And I'm going to put a little handy graph up here on the screen for you so you can see how it relates to one another. And the free stride is really useful for Hell Hard 8 based strategies, because the free stride allows you to ride the Vanguard more. If your Vanguard is based on generating 4 circles, you can more easily ride to a Force Vanguard and start stacking up your 4 circles, as opposed to needing to ride or choose a stride or having to stride for more than one card. So it really helps out in that regard as well. And then the draw to me is bonus, because you can still get a lot of benefit if you can retire 2 of your opponent's rear guards for free or for the counterblast cost. And you don't really need to aim for the draw ability, but if your opponent has some threatening stuff on the board that you don't want to commit attacks to, it's really nice to just plop down Formido, counterblast 1, and nuke up their board just for doing that. And that to me is helpful. And then if you do happen to get the bonus Soul Charge 5 draw card, it's just icing on top of the cake. And then it kind of has a psychological factor, because if your opponent is aware of Formido and know that your clan can use it, or they might be familiar with you from locals or something, then they might tend to play around it more than to commit a full board, which can then help out us in the early game to then get to the later portions of the game where our deck might be stronger. So those type of things that I've thought about, and I really like Formido for that. But there are some negatives, as it is with all things in life. So some of the bad is that if you do get the full skill off, you've effectively taken out 9 cards out of your deck, which puts you on a little bit of a faster clock, because you soul charge 5, and then you add 1 for the draw, and then your Vanguard has triple drive, and then that's just 9 at minimum. And then if you hit draw trigger on top of that, you've milled through 1/5 of your deck, or 20% of your deck in one turn. So not necessarily could be bad. That could be bad depending on what you're trying to aim for. So if you're trying to go late game with Violence Ace and have multiple of him go off, then you might start running low on deck and it might be a little precarious. But if you can then turn that benefit into something quickly positive, then it won't be as bad. But it's something to keep in mind, and it's not just something you want to go into willy-nilly. And then for spikes, outside of Violence Ace, it's a little bit harder to make use of that burst soul charge 5. So then you put those cards into your soul, and those cards are kind of more or less gone for the rest of the game. Like, yeah, you can soul blast it out with various skills and then put it back with Wonder Boy or with Hecaton Gates the G-Guard. But in terms of the stride options that spikes have, Violence Ace is the one that gets the most benefit out of the soul charge 5 ability. But every other one can benefit from the free stride, which is good. So there's a couple minuses in there, but overall I think it's one of the better Progenitor dragons, as I talked about from the outset. And I really enjoy it, and I'm excited to see what it can do with spikes. And I've already been seeing some success with it in spikes. So that'll do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed. Check out the Violence Ace video if you haven't. Let me know what your thoughts on that one. Let me know what your thoughts on this one is. And yeah, that'll do it for me. And until the next one, peace. Be easy.